Can you hear me? All right, good deal. Good morning. Thank you. It is the first time, actually. We just got our credentials in the mail yesterday, so we're all excited about that. So it's been a long journey for Darla and I. Let me start out by first thanking you for allowing us to be here. It is such a pleasure to be able to come and just talk about Northwest Ohio Adult and Teen Challenge Community, which is a brand new ministry that just started. Actually, we're in the process of getting that on the ground, and I'll go into that a little bit more in just a second. First, I would like to introduce my wife, Darla, and our daughters, Gwyneth and Tori Ann. So, Pastor Darla. I'm trying to get my daughters to refer to us as Pastor Mom and Dad, but they're resisting that. So if you could encourage them later, it'd be great. Anyways, also, this is a great experience to be here because Pastor Darren is actually on our advisory committee, and I'd like to thank him for just serving as far as like our treasurer, and then also Dan Gonzalez, if you would raise your hand, Dan. He is also on our advisory committee, and I don't see Mike here. He's our third member, but this church is heavily invested in Darla and I, and we super appreciate what you guys have invested in us, and so thank you. So let me talk to you a little bit about addiction. That's what this morning is going to be about. I know that's a hard subject, but I tell you what, if there is anything that is more common in our society right now, in our culture, it is addiction. And so let me give you a couple of definitions that I have for addiction. As I was plugging in my Bible software yesterday, I found this dictionary, or this definition from, I think, Merriam-Webster's dictionary. It says, being enslaved to a habit or practice or substance such that withdrawal causes trauma. So when you're engaged in something, it will actually cause trauma when you're trying to separate from this activity. My personal definition of addiction is a self-serving activity that will cause one to manipulate anyone or anything to accommodate that particular behavior, including creating a specific schedule that surrounds that particular activity. So if you find yourself, so I have an addiction to caffeine. I'll confess it. For a while, and it's dissipating, but for a while, I would every day have to go to Big B Coffee, and like, matter of fact, my phone knew, and it would give me directions at a certain time at night and says, it takes 5 minutes to get to the nearest Big B. So it's kind of scary on how that rolls. But anyways, so when you start changing your schedule to accommodate a certain behavior, that's a trigger, that's a red flag right there that there is some sort of addiction that's going on in your life. And so let me start asking a couple questions here this morning. How many of you are familiar with or know somebody or have a family member that struggles with some sort of addiction, whether it's drug addiction, alcohol, pornography? Yeah, so let me clue you in. The rest of you probably are being fooled by that. I mean, because almost everybody knows somebody that is struggling. So, secondary question, how many people know somebody that has actually lost that battle? Yeah. So, my wife and I have been down in this area for about 3 years now. And in that 3 years, I've come across at least 30 individuals that are no longer with us that I met when initially trying to help them recover from an addiction problem. There was one young lady when I first moved down here, this is in October of 2015, about 3 weeks before I met her, she was 22 years old, had twins, and the twins were taken away from her right at the hospital. Like, she couldn't have custody of the children. And she came home, and she was struggling with heroin addiction, and I was talking to her, trying to get her into long-term treatment, and her fear was that she wouldn't be able to survive rehab because she couldn't quit smoking. And so I asked her, I was like, are you going to allow cigarettes to get in the way of you saving your life? And sure enough, within 3 weeks of that conversation, she was found with a needle in her vein, stuck in a house that was abandoned, and her body had actually been there for 4 days before anybody even discovered her. So this is just a rampant problem that's going on in our society. So, follow-up question, how many people here are sick of addiction and what it's doing to our community? Yeah, you ready to do something about it? Yeah, let me tell you, God is here, and He is doing something. Yes. He is doing something, and He is going to invade Toledo. And I want to talk to you about that, how God wants to make His name famous here. So let me back up a little bit and kind of give a couple of quick stats regarding what's going on as far as with the heroin epidemic that's going on. Big thing that's invading this area is fentanyl and carfentanil. In 2017, illegally produced fentanyl and related drugs like carfentanil, which are opioids, were involved in 71% of the unintentional overdose deaths. By comparison, fentanyl was involved in 58% of those all overdose deaths in 2016, 38% in 2015. 2017, last year, so the numbers aren't out for 2018 yet, obviously, because the year is not done yet, but last year, the state of Ohio itself lost 4,854 people because of opiate addiction. And I can tell you the fact is that number is actually low, because if a state or if they can attribute this to any other source, whether it's like hypothermia, if somebody dies in the snow, they will attribute that death to something else to actually to kind of avoid the opiate connection. So the numbers are crazy. In 2016, 58% of all deaths that were here in the Ohio area were due to opiate addiction. The numbers are just staggering. The state of Ohio is now investing over $1 billion every year just to battle drug addiction, and at the state and local levels. So the fact is that nearly 80% of all Americans are using, or nearly 80% of Americans that use heroin, including those that are in treatment, report misusing prescription opiates prior to using heroin. I can't tell you how many times I run across somebody that says, well, about 6 years ago I was in a car accident, or I had a sports injury in high school, or I had my wisdom teeth taken out and I was prescribed these pills. And then all of a sudden I didn't know how, because when my prescription ran out, then I didn't know what to do. My body was physically addicted to this. And so they started going out and buying pills on the street, which a Vicodin or OxyContin, goes for like $60 to $80 per pill on the street. And then when they run out of that money, pretty soon, somebody says, hey, you know what, I can give you a better high. It's going to last a lot longer for $10. Right. That jump to the needle is not very difficult at that point. And I'll tell you what, the stigma regarding heroin addiction now is gone. Heroin addiction hits every socioeconomic area of our society right now. And so, the reality is that, it is everywhere. And most businesses now want something like what we are offering and what I'm going to be talking about, a faith-based long-term rehabilitation program. They want something like that in this, metro area of Northwest Ohio. So let me talk to you a little bit about what we are doing. My wife and I, we came down here about 3 years ago to help be a referral center for Teen Challenge up in Detroit. And so what was going on was Detroit was contacted by the National Teen Challenge and said, hey, there's a massive heroin epidemic that's going on in Toledo, and so we need somebody to come down and start a referral center. And so in the last 3 years, my wife and I have actually sent over 150 individuals, from the Toledo, Monroe County area to long-term residential care, whether it was Detroit Life Challenge or whether it was Youngstown or Columbus, in Minnesota Teen Challenge, Muskegon Teen Challenge. So we've sent individuals. We've had about 17 graduates that have come out of this program, and I'm going to introduce you to one here in a few minutes. Teen Challenge is a very, very difficult program. It's a year-long residential program, highly structured. And so what our goal is now, so we just recently received word that in July that we are no longer going to be supported by Detroit down here in Toledo. And so we felt that God had called my wife and I to Toledo. And so we left Detroit organization. We are now in the process of actually starting our own teen challenge here in Toledo. And this is amazing, amazing effort. It's very, very, it's going to take a few months, so let me just tell you that it takes. So my wife and I, in the process of getting our credentials this summer, and then we actually were looking at doing this through missions, and then we had to apply for the accreditation. So we've actually gone through like 4 background checks, so we're fully accredited. people know who we are in this area, and so. But anyways, so we actually have to go through the national office to start a teen challenge, just to be able to use the name of Adult and Teen Challenge. So we just submitted our business plan a couple weeks ago to the national director, and then we're going to be going through a couple more interviews. And then once that happens, hopefully by the end of this month, we'll actually be able to apply for our paperwork for the 501c3, and then it will be official. It takes 6 to 9 months from that point. So our goal here, this is kind of the timeline of what we're looking at. Phase 1 is we are trying to gain our accreditation with the National Teen Challenge as well as the 501c3, kind of jump through the bureaucratic paperwork. And then we want to expand our non-residential programming. So I'm going to give you some technical terms here. Non-residential programming is essentially weekly groups of addiction recovery. I already run 2 right now. I have one in Temperance, and then another one down in Maumee. And then Mike Regan actually runs one here under the Adult and Teen Challenge umbrella. He does that here on Tuesday nights. So we already have 3 groups that are going right now. Our goal is that by June, we want to be able to have a storefront. We're looking at probably like the 5 Points area. Is it Burden and Jackman, I think, is the area? So I'm not from here yet, and I'll tell you, I'll give you a little bit of background on myself here in a few minutes. But anyways, our goal is to be able to get a storefront, and so hopefully I can get about 14 to 21 addiction recovery groups going each week, and that will allow us to be able to kind of expand our influence as far as individuals that want to get help, because most individuals, when they come to the realization that they need help, they're not necessarily ready to go into a long-term residential program. They're at the point where like, well, I can handle this, and I'm going to do it on my terms. And so what's interesting in the Gospels, I've never seen Jesus say, well, I'll forgive your sins if you do this or you do that, and you go to 12-month program or something. He never did that. He just met people where they were at. And so we want to be able to follow that example. And so our goal is to continue the addiction recovery groups, and then continue the referral and sending people to places where they can get the long-term help when they're ready. And then also, at the same time, we want to be able to have a place that for those that have graduated the long-term program, we want them to be able to come back and be able to plug in and have mentorship and discipleship. Phase 2, hopefully we're going to have this by December of 2020, is acquire a house and then create a pre-induction center. And this is going to be the first one in the country. And what this is going to be a 45 to 60-day program, intense discipleship program that helps individuals when they're ready to get help and come from the addiction recovery groups to be actually enter into a residential program where they're going to be able to get all of their testing done, to be able to kind of go through some form of detox, because most people, when they come out of this, it's come as you are. It's not you have to be ready for. You have to have trash cans ready for people when they're going through the detox phase. So we want to be able to do that. We learned Darla and I at a marriage conference a couple weeks ago. We learned something that was interesting, and I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but it takes 63 days to be able to create a long-term memory. Is anybody aware of that? I thought that was kind of cool. So one of the things that we want to be able to do during this time when they're in the pre-induction center is actually help an individual create a long-term memory of being sober. That's huge. If when you're going through addiction, it's very, very hard to remember when you're not addicted. And so if you can help an individual get to the point where they can learn to remember sometime a focus point of when they were sober, that will really, really help somebody in the long term. And during this, pre-induction center, that first 30 days when somebody is in a program, we have about 80% washout. So when I went through the program 20 years ago, there was probably about 340 individuals that went through the program in that year that was there. Only 28 of us graduated. 80% of those people that washed out was within that first 30 days. So we want to be able to help come alongside people and help them be able to make it through that first 30 days to 60 days to be able to kind of help them come to a point where they can commit to a 1-year residential program and then help individuals get all of the paperwork and stuff like that that's done. Then phase 3 is, we want to be able to get to our own 3 to 4 month residential center. And then long-term phase 4 is add our own 12-month residential program right here in Toledo. And so that's the goal. So let me give you one individual. Dave, will you come on up here for a second? I would like to introduce Dave Leganic. This is, I need to stand up here. No, you stay here. All right, there we go. So I feel better. Anyways, so let me introduce Dave. I'm a short guy, I apologize. Dave, tell me a little bit about your story. You're from Toledo, right?
Yeah, I was raised in Toledo since I was about 1 year old over on the east side there. I was brought up in a Methodist church, and I had some experiences with God at a real young age, and I had a real tender heart, and I just wanted to love all my friends at school and stuff, and things happen and hurts happen, and life is hard, but there was a couple events where I was letting myself be open when my parents were divorced, and I was kind of in class crying, and all the kids were laughing. So I decided, no, I'm not going to have that, and I started to harden my heart. And from then, I decided to just kind of be sort of work orientated, and I would just strive real hard to be the best. And went through all of high school that way, and I had, achievements and things like that. But there was no joy. There was just struggling and hiding myself. And so about the end of high school, I kind of got frustrated with that, and I decided that I was just going to be a rebel, and I was going to just party all the time. And that's what I did. I started with smoking pot and partying with everybody and being loose with it. And one thing led to another. A few years down the road, I was shooting heroin. And
how long did that go on for?
Almost 20 years. I got into it, and right away I was like, oh boy, I can't be doing this. And I try to stop, and just by what I learned before of just harden myself and try real hard, and it only lasts for a little while. I'd come back out, and I'd go back to it.
What was the longest time that you went being sober?
Truly sober, not really. Not really. I mean, I would put down the heroin, but I would still smoke weed and smoke cigarettes. And, I thought I was being pretty victorious if I could just not do dope. Heroin is what I called dope. But, that's what I considered victory. And I was just living in shame, always trying to cover up and make myself look good for people,
Where did we meet at?
You and I met when right before that, I came into church with my sister was coming to this church and my mom, and I decided to come one Sunday, and I was in real bad shape. I was down about 150 pounds and kind of losing everything, it was getting real ugly for me. And I came, and Dan Rogers from Cherry Street Mission was there, and he was talking about some stuff I didn't really understand. And but anyway, he gave an altar call, and I came running up, and it's like, I can't live like this, and I don't know what to do. And he said, well, come down to the mission, and we'll figure something out. And then I went down there for a little while, and after a couple of weeks, one of the counselors there, his name was Hollywood, he brought me down to St. Charles Hospital, and we told him, I'm suicidal, and I got to get in here. And so they detoxed me there in the psych ward, and then they called Martin. Martin came and talked to me, and that's how I got involved in Life Challenge in Detroit.
What happened when you were there?
Well, it was kind of, I guess you could say, a culture shock. I was, I really didn't know what it was going to be like, but all I knew that I was willing to do whatever it would take, because I literally tried everything. And so I just went along with it. And my first day up there was a graduation, and a couple of guys that were just finishing their 1 year were up there, and all the residents were singing songs, about the same power that rose Jesus from the grave lives in us. And it's just like, wow. So it's like, okay, I'm in the right place, and there is just a peace and an acceptance that really wasn't my idea. I mean, I look back and I see the Lord's hand on me, and He just directed me and kept me when I just really didn't know what to do or have the strength to do it if I did know what to do. So.
You graduated in July of 2017, correct?
Right. Yeah. August. I got an extra month because of doing homework. Oh. There was a lot of homework, a lot of studying, a lot of writing papers and reading the Bible. It's awesome that just the way it was so different from every other treatment that I tried. I tried a lot of secular treatments, and it didn't last. But then I went up to Life Challenge, and I was expecting all this sort of self-help kind of stuff, and it wasn't like that at all. They were talking about the Bible, and they were talking about Jesus. We were studying the Word, and I was just like, I don't know how this is gonna work for me. But there's something about just fixing your eyes on Jesus, and He changes you.
Since then, Dave had he completed a 6-month internship, and then from there, this past January, what have you been doing since then?
Well, yeah, I finished my internship, and then I came back home to Toledo, and I've been staying with my mom, and I've been getting real involved with my church. It's over on Woodville called Foundation Stone Christian Church, and they've just been really welcoming to me, and there's a couple of them really taken me under their wing and sort of helped to keep my discipleship going.
What's the other thing that you've been doing?
Oh, I've been working steady. I've been back into painting, which is
trying to get him to say that he's been a father again.
Yeah. My son is here in town. That was my main motivation to come back to Toledo, as my son is here, and that was it's just so great to be able to hang around with him and not have to worry about if I'm going to be getting sick from dope or whatever. It's just really freeing, and And it's awesome for him too, because he gets to see that, Jesus still does miracles. And still changes people.
Good job. Thanks, Dave. Yeah. The restored relationship that Jesus offers, not only with the Father, but with those around us, that we're able to have community with, is amazing. And so that's one of the things that really wanted to be able to highlight, is the fact that Dave, it wasn't just for him, it was for his son, and he's got a workplace that he goes to that he has influence over, and it's amazing. So let me kind of give you a little bit of story of my story a little bit. Is that okay? Getting cues from my wife. So, but anyways. What brings me to this point? Why do I have such a passion for those that struggle with addiction? Myself, I was one that went through. I went through Teen Challenge 21 years ago. 21 years ago, I was a brand new baby Christian, and so what led me to that point was when I was a child. First 3 years of my life were pretty much known all about. It was abuse from my mom's boyfriend, and he had put me and my sister into the hospital a few times due to physical child abuse. And actually, the state of Michigan has stepped up to my mom and said, "Hey, look, we're going to take your kids because you can't handle them, and if you want them back, you have to get rid of your boyfriend." And so we were briefly back in my mom's custody for a few months, and then she went and married her boyfriend and gave me and my sister up. And so that started a tour for me to go through the foster system for about 3 years. I went through about 30 different foster homes. It was a crazy nightmare that scarred me as far as I lost my identity. I had no idea who I was and what my purpose was. And so from there, when I graduated from high school, I did get adopted, in like my 31st home or something like that. I lose track. But anyways, but I was adopted, and I took on the name of Hall, but I had no idea who I was. And so when I graduated from high school, my first thing was to go find my full-blooded natural sister, and then I found my natural family, and I kind of mixed it up with them. Met my natural mom again, met my natural dad. What I found was that everybody in my natural family were all drug addicts or alcoholics. Everybody. I mean, there was nobody that was sober. Nobody knew what it was like to be sober. And so so they introduced me. I had already started smoking cigarettes by the time I was 14. By the time I was 15, I was using speed on a regular basis. By the time I was 18, when I met my natural family, I started using alcohol and pot. And then from there, when I met my natural dad when I was 19, I started driving semi with him for a while. He introduced me to crystal meth, got me addicted to that. And then he actually, I used to deal to the point, I was to the point where I was dealing drugs to both of my natural parents. And then by the time I was 26, I was using heroin on a regular basis. I wasn't shooting up, I was snorting it. I thought I was better than that because I wasn't shooting up. And I was like, well, at least I'm not shooting up. That's how we drug addicts justify ourselves. Say, well, at least I'm not doing that. And, but the reality is that we were all lost and struggling with addiction. And so somebody had dared me because I had been high for 7 years straight. I cannot remember during that time a time of being sober whatsoever. Like none. It was completely high the entire time. And I worked 2 full-time jobs. One, whichever job paid the most, that money went to drugs. Then I paid my bills. And so I was a fully functional drug addict. And when somebody had dared me to go sober for 24 hours, I was living in my drug dealer's basement, and I found myself within 18 hours of that 24-hour period, that trial period. Within 18 hours, I found myself in a puddle of blood. In my drug dealer, he found me downstairs, and he's like, "Dude, you cannot do this here. You've got to go." And so I got kicked out of the drug house and went back to my adopted family and asked for help. So I'm going to do the Michigan thing. Sorry. So I grew up in Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids, Michigan, about 30 miles north of there, actually, a small town called Sparta. I lived in the country. But anyways, so my adopted family decided it was a good idea to send me to Detroit to get off of drugs. There is a joke there, I promise. When I came to Detroit, and I was like, okay, well, I don't know if this is going to work, but I was tired. I didn't know what else to do, and so when I went through the program, I came in and I literally had no idea how this all was going to work, but because I was a rebel. I went in looking like Marilyn Manson, goth, like horrible, long black hair, not at all like what I look like now. Talked horrible, very, very bad tongue. But anyways, I got kicked out a couple different times. I apologized to Dave quite a bit because when he went through the program, half of the rules that he had to put up with are my fault. So, it was a mess when I went through. The third time I was accepted back in, most of the staff thought the executive director was punishing them because of bringing me back. But when I was in my 10th month, it was in September of 1997, I discovered a verse, Ephesians 2:10, that says, we are God's workmanship created in Christ Jesus to do good works which he prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Literally what that means is that God knew who I was before he ever said, let there be light. Before he ever created the world, he knew who I was, and he had a plan for my life. And so I started looking at that, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute, there's something up with this. And so I actually took like 6 pages and wrote down everything I did, and then I looked at that and like, well, is there anything that God would want somebody to do that's on this list? And potentially he would want somebody to graduate from high school. That was it. That was the only thing that I could identify on that page that God would want somebody to do. And from there, I was like, man, I'm in trouble. I'm in deep trouble. And so I just asked God into my heart at that time. I surrendered my life and said, God, if you're real, you can take my life and you can change this. And so I didn't feel any warm, fuzzy feelings. There was nothing that was fantastic. There was nothing in my outward appearance. There was, my behavior. I tried to curb it as best I could. I still had a while to go on that. But what I saw was a few weeks later, we were riding in this bus to church, and I remember looking out the window and seeing some individuals that were hanging around the liquor store, and I remember praying for them. Excuse me. And I remember looking at these individuals and going, God, if there's any way that you can send somebody that would be willing to speak your truth, speak life into these individuals, let it happen. And if you got to use me to do it, do it. And, I'll do whatever. I want to see this. And then right there, I realized, whoa, wait a minute. That is not something that Martin Hall would ever do. That was a change. That was a true change. And so from there, I begged. I graduated from the program, and I begged to stay on as an intern through the for the next 6 months. And initially, I was rejected. And I asked, I was like, "What's the deal? Why not?" And they're like, "Because nobody likes you." So, I got to understand, I was really bad as a student. But anyways, I convinced them. I was like, okay, you know what, just anything I can do, because if I go back to Grand Rapids, there's no way I'm going to survive. For me, it was a life or death matter on whether I was going to be able to make it and be able to just live if I didn't stay on. I had screwed over 10 months of my time there, and so for the last 4 months, I was able to focus on Jesus. And so from there, I was able to stay on, and then I stayed on as a staff member. Met my wife. I couldn't stay out of her office, and I prayed that God would send her a boyfriend or something like that. And then 11 months after we met, we got married. And that was 19 years ago. So God has been really, really good on that. So I meant to actually preach a little message, but let me leave you with a quick thought on this, because God has done some amazing things, and I want you to understand one of the biggest observations that I've learned through going through addiction and walking out and being able to talk to people and be able to speak life into individuals. One of the biggest principles that individuals need to hear is they need to hear hope. When they're struggling with addiction, they need to hear hope. And so this is one of the things that I have found that God has spoken to me the most is this threefold principle. And it doesn't matter what you're going through now, because this is very practical for every situation, whether you're in addiction or not in addiction, whether you're in a financial situation, wherever. Let me tell you that God is sovereign. He's always in control. There's never been a time in history where God has been out of control. There's never been a time where he's looking at us going, oh my gosh, I did not plan for that to happen. I don't know how that happened. He's God. He's big, and he has big hands, and he is in control of every minute detail of our lives, and he is aware. He's very, very aware of every cry that we have. So those loved ones that you have, trust me, God loves them more than you. God is in control of their situation, and he is able to direct somebody. He is able to direct their path. Keep praying. Don't stop. Ask for God's sovereignty to reveal itself in that situation. The second thing is that God is good. Every facet of God's personality is good. There are many theologians, there's a scene in Revelation 4 where we see all of the angels surrounding God's his throne room around the glassy sea, and you have the angels that are crying, holy, holy, holy. And many theologians believe that every time the angels say holy, what they're actually doing is that they're discovering something new about God. And they've been doing this for thousands of years, and they're going to continue to do this for millions of years, for infinity. And we get to know, we are learning, and as you get to spend time with God, spend time with him, you will learn how good he is. It is Jesus that has the power to change lives. Jesus broke the power of sin, and that is why what we do with Adult and Teen Challenge, the goal is we view addiction not as the problem. That is a symptom of the problem. The real problem is sin. And Jesus already took care of that problem. That's the good news. The good news is that through the death and resurrection of Christ on the cross, and when he rose again 3 days later in the grave, he broke that power of sin. And so all we have to do is say, hey, this issue that you're dealing with, God's already taken care of that. Let me tell you about a God that loves you, who's in control of your situation, and has a way to be able to bring you freedom from addiction. The third thing is obvious. He loves us. He loves us more than we know. He loves our loved ones more than we do. And if we can continually bring our loved ones to God, that's going to be community changing. So I love what you have here, Toledo First. I believe in something that's called ministry starts at home first. If I'm not ministering to my family, I'm not doing my job. My priorities are God, Darla, Gwyneth and Tori, and then my church, and then my job. My job will never be first. My family will be first. Well, actually, God will be first, and then my family. The same thing is true, in missions. You get this area, you start impacting this area, you don't know what world changers are going to come out of this. I can tell you that when somebody looked at me, 20 years ago when I was in the program, I was the last person that anybody ever said, hey, I want you to represent me. I was not that guy. But I came from a small town in Sparta, Michigan, up in the country, backwoods little town. Nobody would have thought a world changer would come out of there. But let me tell you, if God lets me loose, I'm going to change this world. I want to see God make his name famous here in Toledo. God loves this town. He has not forgotten this town. And he is going to bring change here in Toledo.